Morning monsters. So we are going to be concluding our lobby design series today. So this is the final installment, and we may return to the topic in the future, but this will be wrapping out this particular series. So as we were saying at the start, lobby design is a tricky problem, mostly because of long waiting times. This is due to loading your individual game, this is due to matchmaking, this is then going into your individual selection. It's a difficult problem because of the network conditions we've spoken about, but also because of the various complications of how your audience could get split, how your real numbers don't line up with your concurrency numbers, and how small a pool of your concurrent players are at any given time into matchmaking. We talked about the toxicity of the original old school matchmaking, the sort of lobby room design, and then we went into sort of play and wait systems, watch and wait systems, and then we went into softer matchmaking and social systems. So pretty much everything we've spoken about is a very technical solution. So in this final one, I'm going to talk about a very design-heavy solution and a very social-heavy solution. And this one is what we're going to call social matchmaking. Now, social matchmaking sometimes is, in my opinion, incorrectly used to describe what we call soft matchmaking systems. The difference between this really is that it is people-driven, and many times people tell you their systems are people-driven, but they're not necessarily people-driven because they don't want to acknowledge the actual work involved with social matchmaking. So I personally believe social matchmaking is the most powerful of matchmaking tools. However, it's also one of the most controversial, and one of the ones that when players hear about, they're not very happy about. So again, we've already mentioned Destiny in this in regards to the soft matchmaking systems, but when it came to Destiny's raid system, they actually went all out and they were like, you know what, we are going to go for social matchmaking. What does social matchmaking mean? It means you eschew looking for group tools. It means you eschew any kind of lobby or guild matching system, right? You are not making automated ways for people to get together and partake in an activity. And that sounds like you're not building a feature which is actually helpful to your community. It sounds like you're hurting your community. But what you're actually doing is encouraging people to work together. So why is this important? Well, back in the days of World of Warcraft Classic, before the looking for group tools, old MMO stuff, it basically went something like this. If I wanted to go do Molten Core, and I'm sorry, whenever I think Molten Core, I always think the hammer. But when I wanted to do Molten Core, I would go out into Ironforge and we would scream out that we were looking for such and such to fill out and such to fill out. We would, knowing that we want to partake in raid content, build out a guild and build out a social network. And in the act of building that out, we set expectations, we set rules, we did a lot of the work before the actual match took place. But we as individuals had to do that work, which is troublesome if you are new to a game, if you're a minority, if you have difficulty relating to the group. So this is one of these reasons why social matchmaking systems are so controversial, because they're basically a popularity contest, simply put. But popularity is important because everyone, especially engineers, always want to sort of eschew social skills. But here's the thing, right? If I say to you, let's go to the pub for a pint, I'm setting the expectation of 1+ drinks, which is very different to let's go to the pub, let's have a big pub night, let's go out drinking, because that's setting the expectation of that's setting the expectation of a lot of drinks, and that's setting the expectation of a late train or a late arrival. So our mere act of inviting a friend to the pub, how we invite that friend, sets the tone of the interaction. So for instance, if I'm doing MMO or raid content, or I'm doing matchmaking and I'm doing it through social means like Discord and things like that, I am setting a tone. I am saying to people, this is the mood of the activity that we're engaging in. We are going to make it fun. We're going to laugh along. Coffee is still scorching hot. We are going to have a jolly good time. The other expectation I could set is we are going to run this as fast as we can. We're going to farm this. We're looking for this achievement. We're looking to do this medal. We're looking to get this loot. And that negotiation process is not only important for sort of social expectations, but it's also saying, hey, you're the healer. This is how you're spec'd out. This is what you're doing. Hey, equip the sniper rifle. We need this composition to work out. And that social matchmaking, that negotiation phase is all about finding out who is going to do what. And why is this so important? Well, let's talk again about something we have touched on slightly when we've been talking about looking for groups, tools, and soft matchmaking systems. But the investment in clicking a button and looking for a group to join is pretty small. If I'm jumping out of the queue or if I'm dodging out, I haven't got any social guilt or empathy for the people I'm screwing over when I mess with the matchmaking system. If, however, we are actually having a dialogue and we've been talking about going to the pub for 10 minutes, and then after 10 minutes I go, you know what, I'm just not feeling like it, then that's like, really? That's big sad times. That's like, no, why? And it sounds ridiculous. It sounds like, why should we even use peer pressure or social pressure? But it's weird. It's this thing that actually most of the times when we study it, people will be happier when they engage in activity, when they're nervous about it. But if you give them an automated out, they're much more likely to out from an activity. So for mental health reasons, they often encourage people to be involved in a regularly scheduled group activity, because while you may enjoy climbing or cycling or skating or whatever your group activity is, you may encounter depression or you might be time poor, or you might think, oh, I could just work that Saturday to make up for my schedule or whatever. But you do actually want to still do the activity, but you convince yourself the value of the activity is less, and so you don't engage with it. Whereas if it's a regularly scheduled group activity and there is a social network at play, and when I say a social network, I do not mean we're not talking about Facebook. Facebook is not. I'm talking about a traditional social network. When there are people not depending, but people who expect you to be there, that is a big influence. I mean, sometimes they do depend if it's team sport or if it's a raid or a team activity. But that, this sounds like the answer that I'm advocating for here is for developers not to build anything, for game people not to build anything. It's far, far from the truth. Probably the best system that has been built to facilitate this is called Party on PlayStation. It's called Other Things on Other Things. But this is the concept of a socially matchmaked group that can move from game to game to game, and they can stay together and they can be matched together, and the game and the software acknowledges this group of people, this group of friends moving from game to game. Their friendship supersedes the game and their party supersedes. And so things like party voice chat, where the voice chat and the communication is not dependent on the game, is important for that, because when someone's games crash or when someone is still loading up the game, they still want to be socially engaged in that activity. And this is why Discord and Skype and you know, integration into systems like Twitch, integration into systems like Ventrello back in the day, and a lot of those others make that really important. The other side of this is tournament tools. If you can build out tournament infrastructure that helps people, especially if it's fan-run tournaments, build up events and run events, that's great. I mean, so I'm just going to say tournaments there. And then the other one here is events or calendar. So like, yeah, if you can do anything where you're like saying to people, hey, you can say to your 3 friends or whatever that you're going to do that gaming activity on that day at that time, and the platform you're playing on, whether it's a console, whether it's Steam or whatever, can know that game needs to be up to date and patched, that game needs to be ready to play, and everything needs to be good to go for that, and it can remind you about the activity and it can get you into the activity. So there is a lot of sort of high level platform tools we can build out for this. We can also build in some game systems, but this is where we've got to be very careful between intrinsic and extrinsic. Well, you know what, I can just say external. It just means external motivations versus internal motivations. So why is this so important? Well, because you with good intentions, so internal motivations, this is things like friendship, this is things like we are having fun and enjoying the game. These are things that are, this is mastery, so this is like hitting your target, getting more skilled. These are things that make you feel good about it because they're internal motivations. They're reasons that come from inside of you to engage in the activity. Extrinsic stuff is things like leveling, things like loot, progress, any kind of progress modifier, any kind of monetary stuff. So if you have like a currency burn system, or there's esports involved or anything like that, those are all extrinsic. And so what's an example where this damages? So quite often games will build up a guild system, right? And guild systems are really, really handy. They're a really good social tool. But if you have guild leveling, there's a few problems here. First of all, with guild leveling, there is now an artificial reason why I would want to join a group of strangers rather than a group of friends. Or if you engineer it the other way, there might be a reason why I don't want to leave my small, infrequent, unreliable group because we've done a bunch of stuff together and we've got rewards and things, and move on to a new regular group. It removes the social flexibility and the ability for people to move on. Like, you know, I had a bad breakup with someone who's also involved in that guild or whatever, and you know, you don't know the factors leading into people's lives. So these extrinsic motivators can actually destroy social systems. For instance, leveling is a great example. So if you've got a leveling system and I really want to play with my friend Mike, and Mike's level 10 and I'm level 50, that leveling system can get in the way. Now again, you can work around this, but you'll often find that it waters down your concept of leveling and whatnot. So you've just got to be really careful of how these break down. For instance, loot. If people are running a raid for loot, now bear in mind, this is not a black and white thing, right? You can still have social matchmaking where loot's involved. But you can have some pretty bad toxicity onto social matchmaking if the loot system design isn't quite right. It can break that kind of stuff down. Likewise with progress, if there's no reason for someone to go back to a dungeon or engage in an activity because there is a progress boost or bonus, or there's a checkbox and there's 6 dungeons and they really want to get dungeon 3 and 2 and their friend really wants to get dungeon 1 and 5, that becomes an issue. Money is obviously self-explanatory, but yeah, so there's a lot of these kind of things that can come into it. So what are systems that game developers can build? Well, as I said, they can help integrate and build in some of these systems, some of these wider systems. Even if your platform doesn't support it, you could, in theory, bring in some of these systems yourselves. But another way you could tackle the problem is you can do things like the player's met system. You can do things like emotes, or just acknowledge. So both of these are about acknowledging play, right? So none of them, the moment that the player's met system has any kind of mechanical influence on the game, there's a very good chance it'll break down. Like if we have done a pickup dungeon multiple times together, and we get a bonus, there's a strong incentive to sort of hunt out people, and people are less willing to work with strangers or play with strangers, and so you'll isolate new players. So yeah, the big difference here is you're sort of acknowledging behavior they're already doing as players. What else have we missed off? We've talked about the lobby system, we've talked about tournaments, whether or not your voice chat works while you're in the loading screens, and how do you keep the people together. Oh, good AFK systems. So this is more important to social matchmaking than it is to a lot of the other stuff. In social matchmaking, you actually want to allow players to carry other players, because that's more common in social matchmaking. So simple things like the follow command in some MMOs and some games, or where you can basically say, follow this person and they can sort of take care of me and nanny me. That's much less likely to be used in a looking for group scenario or a pug scenario. But in a stranger scenario or in a social matching scenario where you have come together based on a relationship of trust, based on social negotiation, players are much more likely to use systems like follow, where they can sort of be guided around the dungeon while they go off and make a cup of coffee, or to attend a bio break or something like that. So yeah, where does that leave us? So just to recap, seeing as this is the last in the series, it's not very complex, but I like diving into these topics. Typically, whenever I talk about this stuff, it's one slide and a much bigger talk, maybe 2 slides, at least in my external talks, because my external talks tend to be quite cramped, whereas my internal talks I usually can sit down and consult a bit more. So yeah, I mean, lobbies. So loading times, matchmaking, I'm just going to call it matching. We've got to deal with the issues of physics. I know that sounds ridiculous, but if you saw our first talk, you'll know what I'm talking about. And the big thing, I think I need to underline this, is time from intent. Because from the player's point of view, the clock starts ticking when they start wanting to do the activity, and they sit down to engage in the activity. So that includes things like turning on their PC, turning on their console. All of that comes into this experience, so you have to think about it. We talked about how toxic bored people are, and menu fatigue. We talked about that. So that's the concept of waiting on menus will make you fatigued and annoyed at the whole experience, really. So that was most of our sort of setup. Then with the watch and play, watch and wait. we spoke about how to make lobby time more entertaining. Then we spoke about play and wait, and we talked about the ways that controls and education both come into those. More into that second one. Then we talked about soft matchmaking systems. So this is soft geo-matching. We talked about hubs. And we talked about sharding. What else did we talk about? The soft stuff, I'm just briefly going through, summarizing. Oh yeah, we talked about looking for group tools. In the context of play and wait, and we talked about sticky behavior in that sense. And then yeah, finally, to wrap it up on social, we talked about external versus internal, and we spoke about wider platform stuff. So that is things like party and plan tools. And what else did we speak about? Just wrapping it up. We spoke about external and internal. That's one of the main points. Wider platforms. Just sort of run through. Talked about, oh yes, negotiation and expectation. And tone. Tone is so important. People always forget that with social matchmaking. But yeah, it's been an interesting series. I know the style of the video has changed up pretty much every video. That's fine if you're watching this. It's probably been a bit jarring, but it's been a good experience to put this together, and I think the general experience of doing the Morning Monsters experience and talk stuff has been really positive, and I'm really looking forward to it. We will be engaging in lighter social stuff in the near future. We will be sort of shifting up the content and moving around, but for now, those on YouTube and the recording, I hope you have enjoyed this series. I hope it ages well. You know, I hope this holds up if you are watching it away from November 2019, which is when this was all done. So maybe in 2022 people are laughing at this and going, what kind of crazy time was that? So I will say ta-ta to the recording people and just return to our live folks.